Hello everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson. I am a yoga teacher, ordained minister, kirtan artist, amongst other things. If you're interested in deep spirituality, topics like that, I think you'll really enjoy this channel, so please subscribe. Today I want to talk a little bit about the ego, but before I do, I want to thank all of my patrons on Patreon who make these talks possible by contributing every month and allowing me to take the time and resources to make these videos available to the public. So if you'd like to join that community, please check out the links below. You can join for as little as $1 a month. And if you don't feel like contributing financially, if you get something from this, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. All of those things really do help out. Okay, so today we're talking about the ego. Well, the ego is a really important topic in both manifestation and spirituality. What is it? Basically, it is a false sense of separation, and it causes suffering. That's the long and short of it. That's why we want to get rid of it, or we want to diminish its role in our life. Is it possible to get rid of it completely? I don't know. To be honest with you, there have been teachers and people who claimed that they got rid of their ego. There have been people who say that they've met people who got rid of their ego. I honestly don't know. I don't know if you can function in this world without one. And there have been people who supposedly didn't really function. There have been people who, there have been Indian saints who they say that if they didn't feed them or wake them up, that, you know, they would just basically wither away because they're so engulfed in God consciousness or oneness consciousness that they don't even have any awareness of themselves. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other about whether that's possible or not. Anything is possible as far as I'm concerned. But I will say, I'm not sure that that's really what I consider the ideal for us as human beings in terms of spirituality. I actually see that as an extreme. So I'm not sure, as blissful as that might be, I'm not sure if that really is what's meant for most of us as human beings. I generally think as humans, we aren't meant to lose ourselves in divinity, but rather to be able to have one foot in each world, if you will. To live in this world of physicality and also to stay in touch with our divine connection. And the ego definitely plays a role in this. So the ego is this false sense of separation. And I think what I want to talk about today is how does it create that false sense of separation? Basically, it does this through what we might call ego strength. And it does it through basically resistance. It creates a sense of resistance by rejecting something, someone, an experience, an emotion, a feeling, a thought, a story, whatever it might be. And through that rejection, through that big no, it creates this false sense that it is separate from that which it is saying no to. And once you're separate from one thing, you can be separate from everything. It spreads, if you will. It isn't just confined to that one thing. So you could say that God consciousness, is the opposite of that. It is a big yes to everything. And the more we say yes, the more that we let go of resistance, the more we experience this sense of connection and the love that is universal, that is just reality, you could say. So there's something, I read a book a long time ago, it was talking about psychology, and they discovered something that I think they called ego strength, which is the word I used earlier. And they found that if they took people and they gave them a lot of really hard math equations, I believe it was, to work through, and that night those people would drink more than the control group who weren't doing the difficult math problems. And it's an interesting phenomenon, because doing something you don't want to do, doing something difficult, basically what they were finding is it led you to drink alcohol, drink more the next, or that evening, to sort of repair your ego, repair the damage. Now, what I find interesting about that is that the ego repairs itself by doing something unhealthy, doing something that's basically damaging. And I think this is universally true for the most part if you observe. So again, people aren't repair their ego, drinking too much, eating too much, eating the wrong types of foods, maybe indulging in other addictive behaviors. So it's interesting how the ego rewards itself, right? How if we do something difficult or hard, the ego says, I'm going to do something that I want to do, and that behavior is usually somewhat self-destructive. Now, I'm not a saint. I will drink alcohol. I will eat food that is not the best for me, but generally not in extremes, and not all the time. I'm not trying to share this information with you to make you feel bad about having a drink or for eating chocolate cake or something like that. I'm just trying to point out this mechanism in the ego. So we do something we don't like, we don't want to do, then we feel we deserve a reward. And that reward, again, if we observe carefully, is usually something that isn't good for our health. It's not necessarily a yoga class. It's not necessarily, I don't think treating yourself to yoga class would feel like it repaired the ego in the same way as going for a stiff drink would, right? I think it's very interesting. Or eating that muffin or chocolate cake that you've been trying to resist, right? If you had a really rough day, you might be like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to go get that. Now, you might say, well, those are just things that we enjoy, or I enjoy those things. That's why I want it. But why do we enjoy so much things that are not really good for our health? And again, we might enjoy a yoga class too, but I don't know that you would necessarily have that same drive for a yoga class. I don't know that you would have that same kind of drive for doing something that's good for you. You might, but I don't think it would repair the ego. I think someone who was stressed out or had a difficult situation and then went and did a yoga class or went on a yoga retreat or went to a spa, this is probably somebody who their ego has probably been greatly, greatly, greatly diminished, okay? So I think this is an interesting fact that I wanted to share with you, this thing about this ego repair. Now, Eckhart Tolle, who is a teacher I really like, he also talks about this in a slightly different way. He says, that if a spiritual practice you can do is if, say, someone insults you or diminishes you, and you can feel it, right? You can tell when you've been kind of belittled, right? That your ego has been damaged. What he recommends as a spiritual practice, and again, this is because the ego causes suffering. So if we do these things, we can reduce our suffering, potentially. So what he says is resist repairing the ego. So in those instances that he cites, if someone slights you or says something to you, how are ways that we might repair our ego? Well, we might either lob an insult back at the other person, right? We might argue back. We might also call a friend and say, hey, can you believe it? This person did this, this, and this to me. And then our friend might say, oh, that's not true. You're such a wonderful person. How could they say that, right? So what Eckhart's suggesting is don't do that. Just let your ego be diminished. Just let it be what it is. So again, this is a practice that you can do. I find it very, very interesting. So I would love to hear your thoughts. Is this something that you've experienced? Have you ever played around with this technique of not rebuilding your ego, of letting it be diminished, not going to get the drink to reward yourself, not calling the friend to have them kind of pump you back up, right? Calling your family or friend to tell you how wonderful you are, just letting the ego be diminished. Now, the importance of this is that you're not your ego. That conception, that story, that idea, that limited belief, again, this ultimately causes suffering because you see how easily the ego is diminished, how easily it is put out of sorts, right? Just having to do something you don't want to do, getting insulted. So letting it be diminished, then you begin to strengthen a different part of yourself because you're not actually diminished by that, only your ego is. So I would love to hear your experience with this. Please share in the comments below. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, namaste and have a beautiful, beautiful day.